Hey, everyone. Welcome to Locked On Lakers for Friday. Brian Kamenetsky and Andy Kamenetsky. Andy, congratulations to LeBron James. He's a billionaire, and part of that empire is built in entertainment. We're going to talk about what he's got coming up and what he's been doing with Amy Nicholson. She's the host of the Unspooled podcast and a film critic at the New York Times. That's all next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks to everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Friday. We get this thing up bright and early for you, never behind a paywall, always available, fresh Lakers content. Make a Locked On podcast your second podcast listen of the day, or failing that, try the Unspooled podcast with Amy Nicholson, who is our guest. In fact, for just this one time, we give you permission to skip the second listen with the Locked On Network and go straight to Unspooled.
Just as long as a Locked On show is your third listen.
Right.
We are the first lison. Amy is the second listen.
Yeah, we're not giving up the first listen part, Amy. Sorry.
Right.
Why don't they listen to us together?
Yeah, you're combining all the listens. How are you?
I'm lovely. I'm so happy to be here talking basketball with you guys. I've been following you on Twitter for so long, and now we get to actually hang out.
This is very exciting.
Really cool. And you are a massive Laker fan. That was one of the reasons that we thought about having you on the show, beyond the stuff that we wanted to get into specifically with LeBron in Hollywood. You told us before we started talking that there's a sad note to open things on. You have like a box of Alex Caruso shirts that have just
for people who can't see, who aren't watching on the Locked On Lakers on YouTube feed and are listening the old-fashioned way. Amy has a Showtime shirt on that, paying homage to the Lakers, but in happier times would have worn the Caruso shirts. What happened? Can you just not wear them anymore?
I had to pack them in a suitcase. I remember that this morning. I was like, where are they? And then I was like, no, you took all of your, every time I fall in love with a player on the Lakers, I buy at least one or two very dumb shirts. We have one that says like Schroeder, but he's dressed like the Ninja Turtle Schroeder villain. I just have a stack.
That was a poor investment, Amy. I'm not going to lie.
I really liked him for a while. But then every time we get rid of a player, I have to put the shirt away. So I have so many shirts. Like, it's kind of my record of how we just keep trading people that I love. But with Caruso shirts more than anybody. I have a lot of Caruso shirts. Ones where he's like standing, looking at himself in the mirror, but a goat is being reflected back at him. It's a really crazy one that we ordered.
That's a thing?
Oh, yeah. My boyfriend and I have matching ones. Mine's blue. His is green. We have my boyfriend and I also have matching ones. They're just like Alex's giant screaming face, like just huge, but it's like colorful. It's kind of wrap around. It's like yellow and purple. It's very abstract. We ordered it from Wish, when Wish was still a sponsor of the Lakers. We're like, we'll get a thing from Wish. Never ordered from Wish before. And it took it like 3 months to get our shirt. It was a very frustrating wait.
Was Caruso still on the team by the time the shirt arrived?
Barely. But because my heart gets broken, I've never really managed to make myself buy a jersey. Because I'm like, as soon as I buy a jersey, they're going to be off the team. Yeah, I have a knockoff jersey, but that's it.
Do you have are there any times, any moments that you feel like you could go put the Alex Caruso shirts back on, or is it simply too painful?
I would have done it today for you guys. I really thought about it, but it's hard because, I can't wear it now until like the LA mayoral race is over because I don't want anybody to think I'm like promoting a different Caruso. But he has made me care more about the Bulls. He's our baby bird. I want him back. I really just want him back so I can wear them all on the Lakers. It can be synergized. We need him. We need him back here.
This is good though, because I remember last off season, I did, Andy and I carried on and on and on. As it turns out, we were right that this not signing Caruso thing, because you're just too darn cheap to do it, was a really big problem. And a lot of people, this was mostly before the season started. Once it did, people kind of backed off on this, but everyone said, when are you guys going to get over the Caruso? It's like, so you never did. And you weren't one of those people yelling at us last summer.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I feel like it's rare for an NBA team to find that player who feels like the heart, Like he just played hard out there. He played harder than everybody else. And then they become like the image that they're like, you saw Caruso's face tagged everywhere. Like when somebody just feels like they represent you and your city and your team like that, that has to be worth more than they were willing to spend.
Is this the shirt?
Yes, I have that shirt. Yes, I have that shirt. Mine is blue. Yeah.
Oh my
Yeah,
God.
it's
If you
Alex.
can't totally see it, it's Alex, and in the mirror, it's a goat. Oh my God.
It's
that's a
good.
great shirt.
It's good. But
Now,
I mean, I hear you. And like, I mean, I am the kind of fan who really values loyalty from a front office. So it's been a hard stretch. And like, all I want is to have a Laker who just belongs to us the way that Kobe did, who came up from, either got signed as a Laker straight up, came up from like our own like South Bay Lakers. I want that guy and I just want to keep him and I want to like build all of this fandom and love around him. I mean, of course, I'm hoping like good things for like Austin Reeves and like Mac McClung. Like, it'd be great.
Have you bought a McClung t-shirt yet?
I mean, those two guys learning how to like do Instagram promo. I'm kind of like, no. This is wrong path.
I'm not saying things have taken a bad turn for the Lakers, but Amy is in the Mac McClung business now.
He's got great springs. He really can jump.
He does.
Oh man, this is where
it gets to a certain thing that I think is underrated by the organization. In that, because it is always such a star-driven thing, and the Lakers only have stars, and it's stars, and that's the ethic of the team, and all this stuff, is that fans won't tolerate difficult seasons if they're not winning, like if they don't have the stars, whatever, that building with young players that fans can get attached to is something that Lakers fans just won't do. I think it's true to some degree. There's an expectation of winning. But I think if those players are good and people like them and you feel like you are part of it, I think more fans would go along with it than they believe.
Yeah. I mean, do you think like looking at, say, how good Brandon Ingram did with the Pelicans in the offseason? Like, I mean, will any of that register with Laker fans? Because I think you're absolutely right. Like we get very impatient. We don't like losing at all. And I love a building process. I would love to build this year, maybe even build 2 years and then have a team that's like ours to really love in 3 years and let them do that run then.
I mean, first of all, just for people to really understand how much you'll attach yourself to players, this is a tweet that you sent out a few years ago from New Orleans. Abso-goddamn-lutely worth flying to New Orleans to give Jared Dudley a standing ovation at the last regular season Lakers game of the year. Oh, and Smoothie King Center has walk-up vaccinations. This was from the 2021 season, you and your boyfriend in the crowd in New Orleans to give Jared Dudley his proper send-off. But like to your point though, Amy, Brian and I used to do pre and post game with the Lakers for ESPN Radio in Los Angeles. And we were doing this during that period of the kids, with Brandon Ingram and Lonzo and Julius Randle and Kuz, Josh Hart, all those guys. And as much as Laker fans did get frustrated by losing because it's something they weren't used to, we actually did sense a fair amount of excitement from a lot of fans, a lot of listeners, people calling in or hitting us up on Twitter. Just they were excited at the idea of a potential core being built together. And obviously the organization has to be, able as well as patient to see it through and build towards something. But they could at least see the potential there, which doesn't mean they wouldn't have been willing to trade some of those kids for an Anthony Davis. I mean, there's nothing unreasonable about that. But the idea that you would never dedicate yourself to that type of process is, I think, something that can be frustrating to some fans, certainly to you, the way you're talking about it.
Very much. And I feel like the teams that we're seeing actually play better in the postseason are those kind of slow build teams who I feel like did it the right way. And I want that message to kind of be hammered home here. Like chasing stars. I mean, look what that did for the Nets. I feel like we saw them get 3 stars and thought, oh, we got to do that this year. And didn't work out. And I love Westbrook. My second team for a long time was the Thunder when it was like him and Durant and Harden on it, and Ibaka. And like, I loved them. They came up. And when that team split apart, like it broke my heart, like very badly. I'm a loyalist. What am I going to say?
I feel like sports is hard for you. Sports is constantly breaking your heart and causing you emotional trauma.
That's the best part about it. Like, when you're a film critic, a lot of your friends are like, I don't watch sports ball, like all of those people come up on my film Twitter. And it's like, guys, you love stories and drama and caring and crying and cheering, like everything you love in like a stupid Marvel movie. That's basketball. Like, just watch sports. They're better, honestly, than most Marvel movies.
Lakers season this year, worst Marvel movie ever. There is a very important place where your film criticism intersects with our tastes that is monumentally important. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about LeBron James. And then I have some questions to you about stardom, both in Hollywood and in the NBA, that we'll all get to with Amy Nicholson next.
Locked on Lakers brought to you by Built Bar. Okay, this is something I did not even realize was possible, much less was in the works. But the scientists / chefs / bakers at Built Bar, they've done it again. They have created Built granola bars in 3 awesome flavors: chocolate peanut butter, chocolate coconut, white chocolate berry. You get all 3 flavors if you want with a mix box at built.com right now. And the bars and the puffs with all the protein. Well, this is the protein, but with crunch and chewiness, collagen protein specifically, which your body absorbs better. And as always, covered in 100% real chocolate. There's only 150 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, but 15 grams of that great protein. That's what you want. They've cracked the code Built to better granola. It's a perfect snack to take it on the road, in your lunch, whatever. Superior tasting granola bar. This is the time. This is the time to just enjoy granola the way you always wanted to. So go to built.com, try any of the 3 flavors. Again, chocolate peanut butter, chocolate coconut, white chocolate berry. Use the promo code LOCK15, get 15% off your order. Again, promo code LOCK15, 15% off at built.com.
Quick favor to ask everybody. We have a survey so we can learn more about listeners like you, make your favorite Locked On podcasts even better. Tell us what you like and don't like about these shows on the network. So go to lockedonpodcast.com/survey right now to get started. It doesn't take long, and everybody who completes the survey can qualify for a chance to win one of 10 $100 Ticketmaster gift cards. You can go see stuff with that. So take our audience survey today at lockedonpodcast.com/survey. Amy, maybe this is, I think, an appropriate entry into talking about LeBron and his Hollywood empire. We have a long-standing debate with many people, including ESPN's Dave McMenamin, about the relative quality of the original Space Jam and certainly the quality of the second Space Jam compared to the first Space Jam. Both Andy and I think that the first Space Jam is not a very good film. When you go back and you look at it, it's actually pretty bad. And that the second one, despite the Razzies, was significantly better. And critically, you agree with us. And you're a New York Times film critic, so that means we're right.
Thank you. I think I am right. I think I am right on that. No, I think the second was actually far superior. Like, even trying to use the lens of childhood nostalgia, I cannot make myself like the first Space Jam. It's just a mess. It's just a mess. I mean, I get bored with like Hollywood movies that get too much into like father, son, daddy issues. I feel like they can be kind of pasted on. So I was nervous when I heard that was going to be like a foundation of the Space Jam too. But I just thought it was just like straight up joke. It just had a momentum that worked for me. It was really funny and creative. And I would say LeBron is a better actor in Space Jam 2 than he is in Trainwreck. And he is a better actor in both than Michael Jordan. Fair?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
He's actually, I thought, very funny in Trainwreck, and he's used a very good effect. He was, I think, not as bad as the Razzie nomination acting wise I think won for his Space Jam, but he's not necessarily a great actor. But I was curious though, what you think LeBron can do moving forward in terms of this career in front of the camera. Like if you, from what you've seen based on like Trainwreck or what you saw in Space Jam, which you noted his son, who is a professional actor, you noted in his review was a better actor than LeBron. It's fine. Can you picture something where he transitions to like a Jim Brown or a Rock, where he starts taking on more like actual roles and like playing something other than LeBron, as opposed to he could find different ways to play himself in vehicles, but it could be more limiting in terms of what he can do in front of the camera?
Yeah. You know, I'm not sure he wants to, weirdly, because I saw the movie Hustle last night, like the new one that he produced with Adam Sandler. Every basketball player is in it. Half the coaches of the team are like in it. LeBron is conspicuously not in it. And by his absence, I was like, is he overperforming? Like the only time that even mentions him is just by name. Somebody's like, it's not like LeBron James is on the court. So it's like a tiny acknowledgement that he is there, but he never shows up. And I thought that was telling.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking about it with him. Like he, in certain respects, because he's been famous for so long, like, he's been famous since he was a young teenager. It's almost the equivalent of a child actor trying to shift perception of him. You know what I mean? Like this can be a difficult transition for a lot of child actors when they're discovered as kids. And when they try to transition into adult roles, you don't see them a different way. LeBron has been seen so specifically for so long a certain way. Like even someone like The Rock, who was famous in wrestling, like if you were not a wrestling fan, I'm not sure everybody knew who The Rock was. Everybody knows who LeBron is. And I think it's a different challenge.
I think that's true. And I also think for audiences, there's an expectation that a wrestler is a performer, that they are an actor, that they're playing a part every time you see them anyways, like go out into the ring. And I think that basketball players are supposed to project something that's just like so much more genuine that I do wonder if they have a harder time making that transition in the first place. And also, it's tough. I mean, like, wrestlers are big and swole. Like, the Rock is gigantic, right? But when you're LeBron James, like, it's harder, I think, for you to even fit into a role. Sometimes I worry about that with a lot of our young actors. Like, they're being pressured to get, like, bigger and bigger and bigger in a way that makes them unable to play normal people. Or every time The Rock tries to play, like, normal dad or dentist, you're like, what are you doing? There's a physical type where I think like they can only play like exaggerated things.
But it also, I didn't mean to cut you off. So it also helps that The Rock came from what is essentially an acting background. I mean, he was a wrestler. That you're acting. It's very physical acting and it's athletic acting, but it's acting. He's playing characters throughout.
Yeah, like wrestling to Buster Keaton is a lot smaller of a jump. You're doing stunts with your body. You're performing physically and sneering and giving speeches and monologues. Well, Buster Keaton didn't do any of that. He didn't talk, but yes.
So where do you think LeBron goes as kind of a power broker? Because I think Spring Hill, what was the valuation? It was like 300
million.
Yeah, for the valuation on Spring Hill, right?
In terms of the money he's personally made off it. I think at one point the valuation was like 750 million.
So it's a significant chunk of the billion that we mentioned. How far can he go as a maker and a producer of content? Like you talk about seeing Hustle, which is the Adam Sandler thing. He's an NBA scout trying to get back into the league. Like how much do you think LeBron can go in that direction as a producer of content?
I think it can go super far because when you're LeBron, just the people you have saved in your phone that you can call in to do like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, like the contacts you have, the fact that in this city, in Hollywood, Laker Town, is there a single producer, executive director, cameraman, anybody who wouldn't take a meeting with LeBron? Like, I can't imagine anybody who has an easier time opening doors. Steven Spielberg isn't able to get like a Boban on the phone or like Dirk Nowitzki and say, do 5 minutes of my movie. Like his range is just so much wider than anybody from film. And at this point, anybody, I think solely from sports too. Like he's just been around so much with Space Jam 2. He's already kind of proven his record. And I will say Hustle is fantastic.
Really?
It's like actually genuinely great, which I was not expecting because like Adam Sandler, Adam Sandler, Netflix movie. He produced a really bad one about a football coach like in March that came out. So I was expecting something kind of schmaltzy dumb like that, like a couple kids puking and then somebody gets a heartwarming lesson. No, like Hustle's legit. Like Hustle I think I'm not a fan of Hoosiers, so it's easy for me to say that Hustle is better than Hoosiers. But Hustle, I think it's going to be a lot of people's favorite basketball film for sure.
Wow, that's saying something. But
What really stands out is like the sports guy, like all of the athletes in it give really good performances, like really good. Like nobody in there feels like they're acting. You know how like you can watch a commercial and like somebody will just show up and be like, I like Sprite, and they can't say it in any way that's convincing. Like Boban is hilarious in this movie.
Well, Juancho Hernan Gomez, he's the star, correct?
He is the star, and he's fantastic. Like he plays this like Spanish basketball player named Bo Cruz, who like kind of is like taken out here to see if he can like get into the draft. And like he plays it just like kind of quiet, charismatic. He's like listening, he's like smiling. He gets a lot of lines off on Adam Sandler. Like he's legit good. But Doc Rivers,
a lot of
like,
people don't realize though Juancho Hernan Gomez is actually classically trained.
Is he?
No, I made that up.
I was like, huh?
You couldn't see the Stella Adler influence.
Honestly, we walked out. My boyfriend is a film director, Adam Mortimer. We walked out and he's like, that performance reminded me of Ryan Gosling in Drive. Like just that kind of like engaged inner strength performance.
Yeah,
he's really good.
He's more of a Stanislavski guy, but that's okay.
Oh, and you know who else is really good? I'm sorry, I'm like not trying
go
to
ahead.
Anthony Edwards, #1 draft pick in 2020. He plays the closest thing the movie has to a villain. I don't, I'm not that familiar with like recognizing his face yet, because I don't watch the team, but like, I thought he was a legit actor playing a basketball player. Like he is that funny and good.
Oh,
and
he's
like,
got real charisma.
Go back and just start Google when we get off. Google Anthony Edwards press conferences. He is a treasure.
He named his dog Anthony Edwards 2 or Anthony Edwards Jr. because he said, like him, the dog can do everything.
He was not on my radar. Now he's like very big on my radar.
LeBron's got good taste, though. I think if you look at the projects he's been involved with, like you're talking about this movie, which now I really want to see. I thought Survivor's Remorse was a really good show. He's done game shows that have been successful. Space Jam may not have done well with the critics, but it made a lot of money. Like he seems to have a really good feel for what people might enjoy, but what people like you would actually respect. And that can be a really good combination.
Yeah, I mean, like he's bringing back House Party, which the original is one of my personal favorite movies of all time. And it's like to know that like it's a touch of nostalgia, but I feel like I trust that he knows how to do that movie.
Well, he brought in Stephen, I believe he brought in Stephen Glover, Donald Glover's brother, who's one of the main writers on Atlanta, to be, I think, one of the writers or producers or both of this House Party remake. So he's, I think, smart enough to attach himself to really creative people who can push something like House Party forward.
I mean, but what do you think about him going like outside of the basketball world? And like, he's announced that he's going to be producing a Friday the 13th movie. Like I'm not a Friday the 13th fan in the first place. I think it's the worst of all the slasher franchises, but how is that going to go? Like that's to me, that's the biggest thing out of his like wheelhouse that he's stretching for.
Well, he's got a good sensibility. You talked about sort of stardom. And there's a new Tom Cruise movie out. Hollywood is changing. You've literally written a book about Tom Cruise. I am very interested both in LeBron and some of these other guys coming up and Hollywood and sort of how we look at stars and how we see them. So let's dig into that next. Okay. A lot of people, first of all, what is the new Top Gun good? I haven't seen it yet.
The flying is amazing. It is very solid. I am happy that it did well at the box office and that people are seeing it. It is cheesy, and it does at moments hew so closely to the original that it feels kind of like manacled by its own nervousness about like, will people like this? Will people like this? Will people like this? There's a point early on where like a bunch of the young kids gather around in a bar just like the first one, and they start singing Great Balls of Fire like the first one, and you're like, absolutely not. This would not happen. No. And it's a little insulting, but that's the worst part of the movie, and the rest of it is actually solid to good. It's good.
Okay. I'll probably go see it just because I want to see a movie in a theater and I haven't been in a long time.
The flying scenes are nuts. Those alone are worth it.
he's a lot of people kind of talk about him now as like the last remaining like real live movie star in Hollywood. Like, how do you see Cruise and Hollywood and stars and the way that that is evolving?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's absolutely true. I think he is the last person standing who, with very, very few missteps, has been able to keep a career afloat in exactly the way he wanted to. Like, Cruise has always been the biggest part of all of his movies, you know, since he really made that decision to level up to being like a big movie star, producer of his own films, like in like late 80s. He has, you know, everybody else in his generation has kind of been like, you know, sliding into being like Bruce Willis doing 90 VOD movies, Nicolas Cage doing like a million VOD movies, and then like every so often popping up with like an actual good one. Johnny Depp, to me, you know, hasn't made a good movie since the 90s. You know, he just like, I mean, he's got his Willy Wonka, so terrible. Like, there's something, and Brad Pitt, I think, like, will come out and do like a good movie, but he's seems to be preferring being a producer, I think, right now.
Right. And I think DiCaprio doesn't do movie star movies in the same way. Like, he's got that kind of gravitas, but he does different kinds of movies than Cruise does.
Yeah.
He doesn't do popcorn in the same way. Like, to me, it's Tom Cruise, and I would say Denzel in his own right is that way. And I mean, you mentioned how Tom Cruise was always the biggest thing. Like, Denzel is always the biggest thing in Denzel movies. Like, he does ensembles very, very rarely, and certainly not lately. And that's kind of like that nature of movie stardom. Like, it's not just that you're the biggest star. It's, you know, it's a vehicle for you. Like, a lot of different stars now, they're in these, you know, MCU movies or DC or these different tent poles, and beyond the IP of it all, they often feel like the movies are the vehicle and they are there sort of just to push it, as opposed to something like a Top Gun, which is a Tom Cruise vehicle. Like, Mission Impossible is a Tom Cruise showcase as much as it is IP.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And like, I get frustrated sometimes with his career right now because it is all pushing up blockbusters and spectacle entertainment. And like, I really admire the Cruise who, like, in the mid 80s did Top Gun. His first huge hit was immediately offered 5 times the salary to do Top Gun 2 if he rushed it in right away, and said no, because he didn't want to be like a big spectacle actor. He wanted to be a serious actor. He wanted to be Paul Newman. So he does Color of Money instead, to work with Newman and like become respected. And I feel like he never quite got the artistic respect that he tried for decades. Like, he, you know, in 1996, he does Jerry Maguire and he produces his first Mission Impossible. Huge. And he pieces out to England for 2 years to do a Kubrick movie. Like, he really
Right.
was chasing art. And now he's not chasing art. He's chasing proof that he has loved in multi-millions of dollars. And I think he's also feeling the responsibility as one of the last actors who can open up a movie on
Right.
their name alone to keep theaters going. I respect that part of him, even as I wish we had another Magnolia.
Right. And just to use DiCaprio as an example again, he's making like The Revenant, which is like the most one of the most uncomfortable like film going experience. It's a good movie, but it's like, geez, that's dark. It is not a pleasant watch.
Yeah, he's navigated this thing pretty singularly, I think, DiCaprio, just in the sense of he's managed to choose movies that do pretty well while not getting into he's never done a franchise. I mean, he's never done anything like that. I mean, even something like Titanic, which turned into this blockbuster, at the time, everybody thought it was going to tank. Like, the word of mouth on that movie before it came out was poisonous. So
It's really true, and that's wonderful.
Yeah, but it's just interesting. I mean, he's navigating it, but he's navigating it in a different way because he doesn't go about being a star the same way Tom Cruise used to go about being a star, in a more classical star way.
Right? He wants to be an oddball, right? You feel a little bit of, he wants to be the quirky guy in the corner. But I thought it was good seeing him in something like Don't Look Up, even though it's like he broke the Netflix deal and now he's an actor in Netflix movies. Because he's at least playing kind of geeky, schlubby, funny. Like, I'm ready to see more of that side of him. I don't know if we'll ever see romantic leading man DiCaprio again. I think he like hated being that person, but I'm kind of over slick backed hair dour DiCaprio. So if he's moving into at least a shaggier, weirder area, I'm ready for that.
This I don't know if this is too random or too much of a reach or whatever, but when you were talking about like the tentpole as sort of like the IP and the stars kind of weaving their way in and out of it or whatever, it kind of got me thinking again about sort of what we opened with in this conversation with it, which is the Lakers and the treatment of stars versus the treatment of the tentpole. And there are times when Giannis Antetokounmpo is a massive star, but the nature, to me at least, of stardom in the NBA and stardom really in sports, I think is changing. I don't think it's the same as when Michael Jordan was transcendent or Kobe Bryant. And I think in some ways, LeBron James is kind of the last of those sports stars, of those basketball stars. And I'm curious if you've ever thought about that, like if looking at other stuff, but like also too, like that changes the way a franchise like the Lakers would need to operate. They are the tent pole. They are the flagship, and the people that go through. I wonder sometimes if they subsume themselves in the interests of stars in ways they no longer need to.
I have thought exactly that same thing, that LeBron is the last of his kind, because when he retires in a few years, I don't know who comes up behind him with that hold on the public consciousness. Maybe Anthony Edwards. That would be fun, but I don't know if we do make stars in that same way. And I think some of it is, I feel like all the young guys are kind of forced to become Instagram influencers in their own way. Maybe there's a demystification like that.
Well, that's going on with
like
stardom. I think that's a big part of the demystification of stars in Hollywood too. It's when we were, like growing up, you knew less about them, and it felt like there was a wall of separation that made them feel larger than life. Mm-hmm. And it was part of the reason why they would become so revered and sought after. Is it felt like there was a piece of them you could never have. And now it feels like everything is just out in the open and so incredibly accessible that it doesn't seem as intriguing in certain ways.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And, and to that point of like star creation, I think we're having that problem. Yeah, both in movies and in basketball. I think that's a really great parallel. Like Hollywood used to create stars. Julia Roberts was not famous when they put her in Pretty Woman and they made a star out of her. They don't do that anymore. Like it's very rare that somebody just suddenly pops, like Florence Pugh, maybe. But like I don't know if like you're.
Oh, I don't think most people know who that is.
Right? Yeah. Like there's, us critics have our own like short list. We're like Jessie Buckley. Oh my God. But like who is the last person who came out? And you're like, oh, that's a massive brand new star that we just saw get formed. It's frustrating because I feel like they're only taking bets on big names.
Andy, do you see other parallels? Because I know you're super into it, because like the NBA patterned itself around creating individual stars. The whole thing was built around individual stars. We were talking about the Oscars before we started, while we were kind of waiting for you and to join. And like the Oscars as a show was patterned around like this parade of stars. It just doesn't seem to work anymore. So I mean, Andy, like.
Well, when we were talking specifically about LeBron and maybe that last throwback guy, if you want to take a look at that evolution of NBA and athlete stardom from, say, Kobe to where we are now with LeBron, LeBron is definitely bigger than life. He is a superstar by any measure, but he's not associated with one team. Like part of the mystique of a Kobe or a Michael Jordan or a Tom Brady, even with him now with the Buccaneers, is you associate that guy with one team. And that's part of what builds up the mythology. Like it's easy association. LeBron has obviously, he's going to go down as at worst the second best basketball player of all time, but it's, for lack of a better way of putting it, diluted a little bit in the sense that you don't have a team that he latches onto. I don't really know what it would be like between Miami or Cleveland. I'm not sure if you can latch him on to any of them.
Cleveland only, I think, just because of his association with Akron.
But again, I think it's telling you don't even mention the Lakers as a possibility. Like there's always been to me something keeping me from loving him as a Laker.
Well, some of that is just where it's gone. The title notwithstanding, and the title matters. It has
it's
not
ankles
been
and groin pulls and knees and that.
Missing the playoffs or first round and out. But I think that's part of it too. I mean, like someone like maybe Steph Curry is the closest thing to a throwback in that he is a massive, bigger than the game star who's been with one team. But
he's also 33, 32, 33.
But Steph was who I was going to kick out to you guys. Like, what's keeping him from getting that glitter?
I think I think the only person who I just can't think of anybody like who's under 30 who kind of has that same, other than maybe Giannis. Because I mean, his story is so engaging. He's got the chance, Andy mentioned, to play with the same team forever. He seems interested in that. It's different, and I think there's that parallel track between the evolution of Hollywood stars, the evolution of NBA is interesting.
Even with Giannis, if we're being totally honest, the way American stardom gets consumed, Giannis is going to be seen a little bit other because he's not American. I mean, it's just the way it's going to be seen. It's not the way it should be, but it is the way it will be. Like, there's going to be a certain detachment, I think, in the mythology of Giannis for a lot of American sports fans because he's not American. So it's just,
I mean, things that aren't American, Andy, just aren't as good. I think we know that. It's just America.
Yeah, we do everything right here.
Why don't you love it or leave it, Andy? Willing to host this thing by myself. Other America-loving people. So I don't. This is fun. Like, we could keep doing more things. Can we have you back one day?
I would love that. Like, I'm like fascinated by this parallel track you brought. I'm going to be thinking about this all day until you have me back. So
feel free to shoot us thoughts. Amy Nicholson, she is a film critic for the New York Times. She is the co-host of Unspooled, really fun movie podcast with this guy, Paul Scheer. You'll recognize him, though. He's a Clipper fan. He is a Clipper fan. This, like Brian said, this was a lot of fun. We really appreciate the time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Make sure to check out the Locked On NBA Big Board. Host Rafael Barlow from the NBA Junkies and author of the NBA Big Board newsletter is joined by Richard Stamen, Sam Ferris, and Leif Thulin, giving fans an in-depth look at the NBA draft, the mock draft, player rankings, and big boards. Amy, these are all things that don't concern Lakers fans this year. It's big and free and available wherever you get your podcasts. It's very sad we have no role in the draft, but it is what it is. Locked On Lakers on YouTube. Make sure to make a Locked On podcast your first and second listen of every day, and the Unspooled podcast. Jam that in there somewhere. And we'll see everybody on Monday.